It looks like fall has officially descended and we are in autumn. So for some of you, you may notice that the body is seemingly going through some shifting. There might be some sensations. Often what is said is that maybe there's a fluttering here or a bit of a tingling sensation. And for some of us, that's interpreted as, oh, now here we go again. To give a little more background, about 15 years ago, in the midst of doing these long summer camps, right around September and October, there used to be a sense of doom and gloom that would develop as the light began to shift and the weather began to cool down here in the northern hemisphere. And it became a clear cycle that would eventually lead to some sense of depression or the fall blues that would last until sometimes as late as June. And every year it would just seem to be a cycle that was unavoidable, to the point where I decided to go to a doctor, ask about what can be done, and I was told, well, it's seasonal depression or seasonal affective disorder. And from there was a prescription of medication, different antidepressants and other things that really didn't do much. Then shortly after meeting Angelo, there was a shift that was really clear. It was a lot easier to spend time noticing thoughts without even having a very specific practice. It just kind of started happening naturally, and a complete engagement with the sensations in the body. And as September approached, the sensations became really clear. And even though the thought that, oh, here we go again, we're back into this is doom and gloom, even though that thought arose, it was much easier to sit with the sensation. And it was this tingling, swirling, mixing sensation that was moving actually down the inner thighs. And it became really clear that the body was doing something on its own, and it didn't mean a thing. It didn't mean doom and gloom, even though that was the interpretation. The sensation seemed similar, but maybe not quite the same, without that thought, that pervasive, repetitive thought that seemed to orient itself around a belief that this is the feeling of depression. This is the feeling of fear and sadness about the season to come. And shortly after these experiences, as they were unfolding, somebody had mentioned that the body produces 95% of the serotonin that we have right here in the gut. And this is the immune system's base itself and the second highest density of nerve endings in the body. It's like a brain that doesn't have the ability to filter anything, any aspect of this reality. And an insight suddenly arose. The sensation itself didn't mean anything, yet maybe it was the body's way of producing serotonin. Maybe this was the feeling of the body producing serotonin, and that's all it was. And so even now, at this moment in time, there seems to be a pretty clear sensation, and it's very similar, yet also entirely different. It's a buzzing, tingling sensation that moves down the inner thighs and then begins to move up this direction. And it almost seems completely and absolutely clear that the body is just producing serotonin. That's it. It's just auto-adjusting. Just like the leaves outside on the trees begin to yellow and fall, the body is adjusting for the season, and it doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean anything negative is happening, and it doesn't mean that this is doom and gloom. So without that interpretation, without that thought, the sensational experience becomes quite interesting. And it can be very different at times, yet overall, it's perfectly okay to be with. So this particular video is for any of you who may experience something similar. There have been a few conversations lately that speak of maybe a fluttering that seems to be coming up, and the way the mind attempts to orient around these sensations by explaining it outwardly. Oh, it has to do with a conflict at work, or oh, it has to do with what's going on in family life, so on and so forth. Maybe it doesn't have to do with anything, and maybe it doesn't need to be oriented to anything else. Maybe it's just a sensation, and maybe it's just the body doing what the body does. I mean, we don't even have to interpret it in the sense that the body is creating serotonin. Even then, there's a little bit of an interpretation there. But to allow it to unfold without any sense of avoidance or resistance is actually a semi-orgasmic experience. It feels like a nice, warm tingle that's there. And just like anything else, it ebbs and flows, it comes and goes, and it doesn't have to influence anything. It doesn't have to trigger a compulsive desire to move away from it or to resist it or to hesitate around something. It doesn't mean that there's something to do about it. And so if you're sharing any of this during this time of year, maybe give yourself an opportunity to explore that in a very fundamental way. Without the thoughts telling you what it means, what does it actually feel like? And can you be certain that it means one thing or another? Or is it just simply sensation without meaning? Who knows? Maybe there's something there for you. Be fun to kind of explore.